High Vibe Nation is live. Welcome to the High Vibe Nation, where we have set out to raise the vibration of every human being on the planet. Your hosts on this journey are Sherry Gideons and Pamela Aubrey. So let's join them now in their current interview with a high-vibing individual.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here tonight with Dr. Atil. He is a wellness expert and founder of Natural Wonders Healthcare, a clinic specializing in pain management. Under his leadership, Dr. Atil, along with his team of practitioners and support staff, uses a gentle, heart-centered approach to healing. He alone has performed over 20,000 treatments, providing patients with natural pain relief with a variety of modalities, such as electro-acupuncture, cupping, gua sha, and evidence-based herbal support. We are so happy to have you here on the show with us this evening, Dr. Atils. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, you guys. It's a wonderful honor to be here. I'm super excited.
Such a joy to have you with us. So tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and where your story began.
I don't know. We'll just pick a starting point, right? Because all of our journeys have really no beginning. But I was born in the Fiji Islands. My ancestry goes back to India. Came here to America when I was 7 years old. That's back in 1977. So I've been here quite a long time. That's my physical journey as to what brought me here. But in essence, what brought me, I think, to healing. That's also a complex question in the sense that when I was a kid back in Fiji, I was asthmatic as a child. I have vivid memories of not being able to breathe, access to certain types of medications that you kind of allow for that now were limited or sparse or none. And so what was available was the little bit of Western medicine that my family had access to. My parents also turned to herbal remedies that was prevalent, not only in my own culture, but the herbal culture that exists amongst the native people in the Fiji Islands. And then so I remember having steam baths and smelling eucalyptus and different types of, I think, ceremonies, because, you know, when your child is sick, then you will pray. And so that was part of, I think, my earliest memory of the awareness of health and not taking that for granted. When I grew up here in America, after I completed my bachelor's degree from Cal State Northridge in communications, I was still looking for what I wanted to be when I grew up. And that kind of led me to the doorsteps of Capital Drugs, which is in Sherman Oaks, California. And these guys were like the epicenter in the 80s of natural remedies. And we were kind of, meaning my brother and I, were brought under the wings of these wonderful ladies that were there. And they were really adept at homeopathy and Chinese herbal remedies and aromatherapy. You name it, they knew about it. And it was a traditional pharmacy there. So they had a pharmacist in the back, and you had to walk through all these natural remedies to get to the pharmacist in the back. And so while I was there, I became acquainted with traditional Chinese medicine. So I said, wait a minute, is there something that I can study that is rooted in ancient philosophy, something that I was identifying with for my own cultural heritage? But yet there's a licensure that's available. So I don't have to practice this, out of the garage or in secret, that this is something that the state of California recognizes as real medicine. And so I gravitated towards that. And that's kind of my brief history of what led me to here. And I'm still on that journey.
I love it. I love it. So, we have so many people right now that are so interested in the difference between Western medicine and Chinese medicine. And so many people these days are moving more towards, herbal remedies and Chinese medicine. Can you explain a little bit more about that and what's the difference?
Sure. There's a really cool book called The Next $1 Trillion Industry, and it's written by an economist by the name of Paul Zane Pilzer. And in that book, he talks about that $1 trillion industry being the wellness industry, and how the paradigm from the sickness model of health, meaning that you get sick, you go to the doctor, the authority on health, who then kind of attempts to restore your balance, to the wellness model of health, this awareness that wellness is a journey that we ought to be walking every day anyways. And then when we get out of balance to a point where we can't nurture ourselves or take care of ourselves, that we have relationships, ongoing relationships with people in the wellness industry that are walking this journey with us. So in traditional medicine, the shaman was part of your village, right? The herbalist was part of your village. There were your grandparents, there were your mothers, right? That you grew this stuff. And then so that disconnect in modern society between, farm to table, that's a movement, right? That's reconnecting us to that which comes out of the ground. And so in traditional medicine, the link between your wellness wasn't too far away. It was in your household. It was around your culture. And so the wellness model of health is the paradigm that's being shifted. And it's been going on for decades now, right? So we're right in that trajectory, that sweet spot of where there's a whole lot more positivity that's going on now than ever before. And so as far as traditional Chinese medicine goes, it's at least 2,500 years old, right? I mean, that's a conservative number. I mean, there's records that go back much longer than that. And it's a complete system of medicine. That means it has its own form of diagnostics, gathering information. We do pulse taking, reading the tongue. There's all sorts of impressions from the body that we get to get a full complex profile of what the patient might be presenting with. There's an author by the name of Ted Kapchak. He talks in his book, The Web That Has No Weaver. And he gives the example of if a patient has, let's just say, a stomach ulcer. In the Western paradigm, you go in and they may do different types of laboratory analysis, and they might diagnose you as you have an ulcer, right, in a particular area. And they might, and if you have 5 patients that have that same diagnosis, here's our lab findings, you have an ulcer, then the 5 patients are given pretty much that remedy for the ulcer. Whereas in traditional medicine, if you have 5 patients that have that ulcer, but 2 of them are not sleeping well and they have heat symptoms in terms of their digestion, one of them might be constipated, but the others might not. All of that becomes the pattern that we look at to get an overall picture as to what's going on. So it's a little bit more complex way of going about it. Now, as patients, sometimes we just want something gone. So if there's a pharmaceutical, hey, if it's going to make it go away, great, let's make it happen. But if it's not, right, then we want alternatives or we want choices. And sometimes the other way around. Let's try the natural route, something that tries to restore balance in us, just so we can have a choice as healthcare consumers as to what are the choices available for us to get better. And so when we say Western medicine, there's a couple of words that sometimes is used synonymously with Western medicine. And one of those is modern medicine, as if Western medicine and modern medicine is synonymous. The problem with using modern medicine and Western medicine is it takes away the credit for Westerners that they themselves come from nature, that they themselves used to farm and live in villages, and that they had grandmothers as well that grew herbs, that knew the plant life and knew the animal life in their region, right? And so this modern medicine is a modern phenomenon. And so it's pretty much, although the scientific method's been around, the way modern medicine is presenting itself in modern industrialized nations, and the word industrial kind of gives us a clue as to the rest of the picture as to how we got here. And so in the early industrial era, for example, in automotive industry, right? Henry Ford didn't invent the automobile. he took the assembly line idea in terms of efficiency to be able to create a product for the masses of the people, right? So you can have any Model T that you want as long as it's the color black, right? So what happened in the automotive industry happened in a lot of other industries. So in agriculture, in terms of food distribution, the same type of industrialization took place. And so the more industrialization that took place, the further and further we became as human beings connected to the source of our own productivity, our own creation, right? So there were laborers that felt connected to their product, all of a sudden didn't feel that connection anymore. So in healthcare, there was no exception to that rule either. The same type of thing happened in healthcare, where we started being looked at as tiny little pieces, right? So now you have a cardiologist that kind of works at your heart, but the cardiologist may not have a lot of insight as to what's going on with the kidneys. So there's some wonderful things that came out of that, right? I mean, there's some amazing technology that came out of it, amazing ability to diagnose, amazing ability to understand the bodily functions that go inside the body. I mean, I'm one of those, I love technology, right? I love being able to get on an airplane and change my latitude and change my reality, right? Technology is not a bad thing. But one of the things that happened to get sacrificed, and I think as the paradigm is shifting, it's shifting as in Western medicine as well. And what I mean by that is yes, there are doctors that are being trained now in medical schools that have more of a holistic respect and awareness to it. And so, you know, there we go.
And I think that's really, it's so valuable too, to kind of help people understand. I mean, holistic health has sort of been a buzzword for several years now. So people are getting more familiar with what that really means. But not everyone has had acupuncture or, has experienced Chinese medicine. And so I think for a lot of people, they don't really understand what the basis is of some of these modalities. And so I think that we're kind of at this point now where people have seen, okay, Western medicine has some shortcomings, and there's some things that we can do differently. And how do we kind of approach that from the perspective of maybe people who just aren't as familiar? And so what do you say to someone who's sort of new to all of this to help them better understand, just kind of the foundation of some of these modalities?
Okay. So I practice Chinese medicine, and by the way, to answer your question, let me preface that by acupuncture or Asian medicine is as much an art as it is a science. So if I give an explanation that is different than what your therapist or your acupuncturist has given, we're both right. How could that be? Because of the style and the technique that we may be practicing. There isn't one style and one form of acupuncture or Asian medicine, okay? So in general, I practice Chinese medicine, which is broken up into two, I think, broad categories. One category is body work, where we actually physically work on your body, and we use different techniques to be able to do that. So we have acupuncture or electro-acupuncture. Acupuncture is the use of sterile disposable needles. There's no medicine in them. We're not injecting anything inside the body. There's an awareness that there's an innate healing intelligence that is inside the body. Case in point, you cut yourself, you keep it clean. You don't have to tell your skin or your body or your immune system to repair itself. It does that automatically. And in most health conditions, right, your body is animated in trying to self-repair. There's a mechanism inside to be able to do that. What they've found in natural remedies is that there are mechanisms that we can employ by way of the foods that we eat, the thoughts that we have, the colors that we surround ourselves, the thought patterns that we may be having repetition in our brain waves, right? Our environment. There's so many factors that can influence our emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. And so Asian medicine is a system of medicine where they were able to organize these thoughts over thousands and thousands of years. And so the body work component is acupuncture, right? Gua sha, it's this technique of scraping. In the West, we call that coining, scraping, rolfing, or spooning. We have a technique that we call cupping. In the Hispanic and Latino traditions, they call that ventosas. Vent means air. The abuelas, the grandmothers say that it takes the bad air out of the body. In traditional Chinese medicine, we say cupping promotes blood circulation. It has the ability to remove heat, and that could be heat could be loosely translated in the West as maybe some inflammation that might be in a local area. And so there's different body techniques that we have to initiate or enhance the body's ability to heal itself. And then there's a whole universe unto itself that's in terms of the herbal culture that is part of Asian medicine. And when I say universe, because there's so many different botanicals and plant life that is in existence that have a wonderful ability to provide healing for us. And then so the energetics of these different plant lives and their ability to go to different organs, ability to kind of create moisture in the lungs if the lungs are dry, or to be able to, if the stomach, there isn't enough what we call stomach fire, right? The digestion isn't good, to be able to kind of enhance those abilities. So there's different aspects of Chinese medicine. And so there are acupuncturists in the state of California that call themselves acupuncturists, but they stick strictly to the traditional herbs. There are acupuncturists that don't do traditional herbs. They do just acupuncture. At our clinic, we like to walk the middle path where we do herbs as well as body work. Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Lovely. Yeah.
Oh, were you coming to me?
Yes.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on too is what you notice in, like, when people come to you, what do you primarily see that they're experiencing?
So in my clinic, we are pretty much a pain management clinic. And so we have had the privilege of getting in contracts with large medical institutions very early on, and that required understanding contracting, things of that sort. So in the current medical system, acupuncture is institutionalized as part of their pain management protocol. So when the average patient comes into, and pain is a huge motivator anyways, we might, little minor pains here and there, we might, our body's amazing at healing itself. We just have to leave it alone, and most of the time it goes away. And so when a pain becomes chronic, anywhere from 3 to 6 months and beyond, then at some point we start knocking on some doors and saying what might be available for us to be able to kind of deal with this, right? And then so acupuncture is institutionalized. So when the average patient comes in, 60 to 70% of those patients have some sort of a pain in the body. And so when we work on that pain, we work on the pain as if it is that pain. So if a patient comes in with neck pain, I work on it as if we're working on a neck pain, right? Or lower back pain, sciatica, plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnel, you name it, we do it. And so we do electro-acupuncture. We'd like to do a bunch of techniques. We don't leave it just to acupuncture. As amazing as acupuncture is by itself, I kind of, I've been doing this for a long time. So I always approach every situation as if that were me or my relative, what would I do? I wouldn't just do one. I try to do as many things as I can that is medically necessary, that we think that we're going to get a good change going. Every now and then, a neck pain isn't just a neck pain, or a hip pain isn't just a hip pain, right? So at the risk of getting a little esoteric, but you ladies, I think will appreciate this. Dr. Gabor Mate Dr. Gabor Mate does a lot of work on wounds, right? And not just, so many of us, if not all of us, have some sort of wounds that we carry. And so it's some sort of a trauma, and maybe it wasn't a huge physical, emotional trauma that some people have gone through and they're just fine, but maybe you might tend to be a little bit more emotional for one reason or the other. It just kind of stuck with you, right? And so he likes to call those hungry ghosts. And so we all have these. And so the idea in Chinese medicine, and I love the philosophy of Asian medicine because they were able to take, they're able to create a system around things that go on in the body, but they're able to harmonize it in terms of it's not just a body thing. So when I first started out, even though I knew this knowledge, right? So I would separate things into 3 categories, like body, emotional, mind, and the subtle being, right? Like the psycho-spiritual side of us. And I would like to see like, okay, well, this is just a body thing or this emotional thing. The longer I've been doing it, the more I realize that those lines are so blurred. And the more I've been doing it, the more I'm realizing, oh my God, not only are the lines blurred, but it's so difficult a lot of times to figure out where one ends and the other one begins. So in other words, when we have a hip pain, sometimes, once again, it is just a hip pain, okay? And we work on that. We will always work on that as if it is a hip pain. But if after 2 or 3 treatments, when most of my average patients are responding or should be responding, we have a pretty good success rate. And I don't mean that out of ego. I mean that out of humility. We like to do a lot of things to be able to initiate that. Then at some point, I might float the idea is if it's in your hip, there is a meridian that, we call it the di meridian that floats around, it's kind of around your belt, your waist area. All the meridians go up and down, and there's a meridian that kind of goes this way. And the emotion connected to that is decision making. And so if we just kind of look at it in terms of body mechanics, right? What happens? So imagine a basketball player, right? When they're pivoting with their hip. Right. And so if we're at a crossroads, right, we need that hip, that decision making to allow us to pivot emotionally. And so sometimes we're not making that decision. We're not able to make that decision. Sometimes we're not even aware that, hey, we're at a crossroads, we have to make a decision. And so conveniently we have a hip pain, or we have a hip pain is coincidentally or synchronistically, we have a hip pain at that moment. So we have a saying in medicine where diagnosis is 50% of the cure. So just enlightening the patient, hey, just by the way, out of curiosity, right? This may or may not apply to you, but if, the emotion connected to decision-making is connected to the hips. And then so when we are working on your hip in this session, let's go ahead and put an intention, you and I, that if there's a decision that you have a difficulty even confronting, let alone kind of what we're going to do about it, just the awareness. And a lot of times it's, I do this, I shouldn't be surprised anymore. Right. But I have this healthy curiosity. I'm still fascinated, like how often it resonates with my patients. Like, oh my God, you're right. I've just been sitting on this thing. I haven't made a decision yet. And I was like, it's okay. You don't have to make a decision. A lot of times just the awareness, you have to make a decision. And then now let's put that intention into your hip pain. And all of a sudden the ability for the body to kick into a whole other gear of self-repair kicks in, and there's healing that takes place.
I love that because, I can attest to, having that background in my own life. And then I lost my lower back several years, 4 years ago. I ended up with degenerative disc disease. And initially, I went in, consciousness, and I started to try and heal it that way. And it got to the point where I just wasn't getting any better. So I eventually went and had an MRI, and they discovered that my discs had collapsed on top of each other. And so what they did, so I opted for the lower fusion. And then what happened in the healing process is we went through dry needling. And so I also had developed bursitis during that period. And so I know a lot from Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And so that whole lower back region, bursitis, all of that was very much around what you're describing. So there was the indecision, and there was also the issues related to lack and limitation around money.
Yeah.
Because that's all lower back. And so with myself, when we did the dry needling, what that did was, my God, it sped up my healing for the back surgery. I mean, like, boom, like that, and so many people are scared. They think of that thought, oh my God, there's these long needles. Because in my case, we used them in my glutes.
Sure.
And that affected obviously the hip and the lower back. And so I love that. And then we also did the cupping during that process.
Yes.
Which, holy mackerel, I healed like that.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Wonderful.
I love that. Yeah.
Well, it's really incredible. I think the way that you describe it, to me, what it says is that this work is actually working with the body, with its natural mechanisms, with what it's intended to do, and supporting them and giving them maybe, that little nudge here, that little nudge there.
Sure.
And it's, when you stop and think about it, it's kind of remarkable that our bodies have been designed to do this.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's what we're experiencing in the time and the day that we're living in, with less airplanes in the air, less cars, right? The earth is doing that. The earth is regenerating, right? And so that's the natural makeup of our beings, which is the ability to self-repair, right? The mechanism of self-healing. I mean, that awareness is so powerful, and that's brand new information to a lot of people. And so one of the things that I make it a point to do with our patients at our office is that every little bit of improvement, right? And so sometimes I'll have a patient a brand new patient that'll come in, and this whole thing's brand new to them, right? And so we do one treatment, they come back the following week, and then I ask, how did we do? And so they said, oh, it didn't work. And so I have the surprised look on my face, because I'm always surprised when I hear that. And then I said, well, not even for an hour or 6 hours or 12 hours. Oh, well, maybe it worked for a day, and then it came back. I go, okay, let me tell you what a big deal that is. Because we didn't use any drugs, right? We didn't use any invasive techniques. Every ounce of healing that you experience, even for a minute, even for hours or a day or two, that's your body's ability to repair itself. And we tapped into that. And so, like chiropractic, physical therapy, massage, we have cumulative benefits. Each treatment kind of builds off the other ones. And then so through progressive treatments or consecutive treatments, we should be able to build upon that. But that awareness of not minimizing and being thankful of that power that we have, not just to heal ourselves, but that power that we have to heal others, right? So this isn't just something that I do. This is something that all mothers do and all fathers do when they have a child that's scared and then you hold them, right? This is something that is innate in all human beings, the ability to love and to connect and to heal. These are the powerful medicines. And then so that disconnect that a lot of times that we feel sometimes is that disconnect because that power, for one reason or the other, right, has been separated from us. And to the ability to reconnect to that power and that awareness of self-healing and self-love, to be able to generate it and to be able to cultivate it enough to where you can now share it, right?
I love that. And I love how you're connecting them to the awareness of their body, right? Just gradually helping them become aware of paying attention to their body and then acknowledging their body. So what you're actually helping them shift their mindset, right? In their care for their body and in how you're working with them.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it's like baby steps, right? It's an awareness they might not have had because they think it either works or it didn't work. It's all or nothing.
Right.
And you're teaching them that it's, how to pay attention, how to listen, and how to really nurture and bring in that gratitude piece, which we know is healing and boosts the immune system anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. And when I first started, because I hear this a lot, right? Every now and then, that somebody will come in, oh, by the way, I don't believe in this stuff. My doctor recommended this, and and when I had first started out, I had a whole speech ready, different scientific studies and, that I would try to convince the patient on how, this stuff is real medicine. And the longer I did it, the more, after, doing thousands and thousands of treatments, when I personally no longer needed convincing, when I personally had zero doubt in myself in the ability of not the power that's in the needles. Those needles are inert. There's nothing in those needles. The power in the body to heal, right? When I have zero doubt in the magic and I don't mean magic in a foo-foo sense, but it's just so magical, the ability to heal that's inside the body, that I believe in your body more. I'm not expecting you to believe in but I at least believe in your body.
Yeah.
Right. At least believe in that, because it got you here. Right. It got you to walk through that door, somehow got you through that door. I believe in that. And so on the same note, right, Sherry, when you had alluded to the needles, right, one of the other universal things that I said, it's got to be 8 out of 10 patients, right, 7 out of 10 patients. I'm afraid of needles, right? And so when I first started out, I had this whole speech and I still give this speech because it's important to know facts, right?
Sure.
Something that our brain can wrap itself around. But that idea that these needles are so thin, they're thin like your hair, that you can take a bunch of our needles and stick it inside an injection needle that a doctor might use for injections.
Right.
And so those needles are thick because they're putting something in you or taking something out. And so it's not unusual then, right? It's not wrong for us to hear the word needle and go to our first earliest experience of needles, right? So no wonder we're terrified of needles. Those things are painful.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about acupuncture, one day I'm going to find another word for needles, and I'll start a movement talking about it, because it's almost not fair to call them needles, because its intention, its purpose, its intended use is completely different than the needles that's used in conventional medical settings.
I think we'll do that soon. Yeah. I'm going to challenge you on that.
Right.
Well, it's very subjective, small, they don't hurt at all.
Right. And then so you may not
feel them at all.
Yeah, most patients don't feel them. And if you do, most patients don't feel the needles. And if you do, literally a pinch or numbing or like a light electrical sensations are normal. Anything beyond that that's uncomfortable, you just let us know and then we'll take care of it, because it's really important that you're comfortable and that you actually enjoy your sessions, right? Yeah. And so so that's in the beginning, right? My talk on getting a patient to feel comfortable with the needles. But one of the things that I think that has really helped me a whole lot in terms of being the doctor that I am now is being a stay-at-home dad. And so when my babies were born, and by the way, there used to be a time when this was happening that I couldn't have this conversation until there was a couple of beers in my system, because it challenged my whole identity of masculinity and that whole thing. But today I don't need any beers. It's one of the most proudest things that I've ever done. And it's the most amazing thing that I think that transformed the person that I am today, including the practitioner that I am. But when babies, when they can't talk and they can't hold up their neck, and then when they've soiled themselves, but they can't communicate that to you outside of, their cries, when you don't know what's wrong because they can't communicate with you in the way that we know how to communicate with each other,
right?
Then there's a part of you that has to now tune in to your baby, right? And so that ability to be able to go there and allow my babies to feel safe with me, to feel comforted with me, to just allowing them to know that I'm here, just in my physical presence, that I'm here. After having experienced that, and then like our first baby, right? Like when she would go to sleep, like she liked to go to sleep and I'd be holding her like this and her eyes would be locked into my eyes, right? And I just remember vividly this last split second of when it closes, and our eyes were locked. And then so knowing brain science, that's in early development where trust is developed. Mm-hmm. All trust, not just, oh, I trust you, my parent, but all trust with all human beings. The ability to trust other human beings is wired. And then so when I embraced that side of me and like literally went with it, I felt like my babies came as teachers to me, as healers to me, to teach me that this is how you nurture, right? And once I became that, then I give the talk about, hey, the needles are safe, but there's in my body language and in my mannerisms and in my eyes, when I walk into that room, I'm carrying the sacredness that that I experienced with my babies walking in there. And so, and I think that there are ways in which now they feel protected, right, by me. And so those parts that I think comes with some wisdom over time, where somebody feels safe and they know that you're here for their wellness, right? For them to heal.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We had a question earlier from Weldon. He says, what resources are there to search for Asian pain management specialist? Then how do I find the correct one for me? I am willing to try something different.
Sure. So one of the things I always tell my patients when I get asked that is, as with anything, be it your dentist, right, your hairstylist, right, that you try to connect with that person. And so connect with them because there's going to be an element of trust that's there. Thankfully, in modern times, we don't have to have blind trust, right? Just off of our own gut instincts. There's Yelp reviews. So Yelp review the people, right? And the other is it's okay to try different therapists. There's some that you might resonate with and some you might not. I encourage my patients to experience lots of styles and techniques. I by no means am a complete master of all the techniques that exist, right? And so be comfortable in your own intuitive guidance that you will be guided to the place that you need to go. That's the healer side of me. The technical side of me, the technician side of me that knows the power of the modalities above and beyond my own healing abilities, right? My own intentions that go into a treatment. The modalities in themselves are so powerful. So even if you have a novice, somebody who's just starting out, if they apply the techniques as they were taught by their teachers, by the text that's been handed down through generations and generations, if somebody has headache and you do headache points, there's a strong likelihood that you're going to respond, right? So that's that part of you that trusts the medicine and the modalities that's being used. I'm one of those. I'm just a huge believer that I don't just leave it up to just acupuncture, right? We'd like to do all these other modalities to explore all the realms of possibilities. When you have pain, once again, a neck pain, are there styles and techniques that are available where the acupuncturist may never, ever put an acupuncture needle in your neck, shoulders, and upper back? They'll do what we call distal points. Well, they'll do acupuncture maybe on your feet or your hands. And there's studies that show that those points are effective. That's a type of points, right? That's a technique. If your right side of the body is hurting, there are acupuncturists that may not ever put a needle on the right side of the body. They'll work on the left side of the body because of the way the brain and the nervous system is wired, right? At our clinic, if your neck, shoulders, and upper back hurt, we're going to work on your neck, shoulders, and upper back. This doesn't make us better than anybody else. This is just what we practice. And we have a pretty good success rate with it. And if those neck, shoulders, and upper back points aren't working, then we'll explain it to the patient. Hey, we're going to add some other points. I know you might be thinking, what does a point here have to do with my headache? And so we'll try to explain that the best we can, but just that resonance with your patient, your own philosophical system. If you tend to be more scientific, maybe you'll resonate with somebody that has more of a scientific explanation. If you're more philosophical, then maybe you'll resonate with those practitioners that stay in the philosophical zone. I like to walk the middle path and have both realms covered, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that you really focus on building a connection.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering for you, when you have a new client that comes in, is that something that you do is answer questions for them even before they would book an appointment with you?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll do a consultation that is, because, sometimes a patient was like, can I talk to him? And my staff tries to do a really good job at allowing for that to happen. So we'll schedule a time where we can have a phone consultation. But because I've done this for a long time, when the average patient that comes in, there's a talk that I do from beginning to end. It's so rare now that a patient actually has a question when I'm done at the end, that they actually have a question. I mean, because most of the questions have been answered, the basic questions.
Yes.
The other types of questions, there are questions that, and in that initial talk, I'll have questions that I answer that a patient won't have, right? Oh, wow, I never thought of that, but I cover it because the average patient thinks about that. And then there are, through the course of a treatment, there will be questions that arise. And so then we'll have a conversation about that, because there's so much that can go into the ability to describe a condition, right? So if there's digestive issues, we in Asian medicine feel like it's not just a digestive issues in your tummy, that there's a relationship with your liver. So I might give a brief talk on the 5 elements, right? And so the 5 elements, it's just an exquisite way that Asian medical philosophers and doctors were able to organize this vast knowledge in a way that the brain can kind of grasp a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So powerful. I actually know it's interesting because my family has had a lot of severe illness, a lot of long-term, terminal illnesses, and many of them have doctored with alternative doctors and alternative therapies, and in some cases lived many, many years longer than traditional Western doctors were telling them they would live. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that, if you've tried a little bit of everything when it comes to Western medicine, that you have other options, that this is just something, you can try it, you can explore it. Some things may work better than others, but I've seen a number of people in my own family have a completely different life and live many years beyond what they were told they would. And, I feel like there's just not a lot of education out there for people so that they kind of have an understanding that this is even something that actually works. And so I think, it's super valuable for us to have this conversation, but also just for people to hear some of these basic things that you're sharing, because it really is powerful. I mean, it really is, for many people, I think, such a new and kind of novel idea that our bodies are meant to do this. And so just, the fact that you're tapping into sort of this like innate energy that's in our body is really incredible.
Yeah, there's a word that you use there, Pamela, that alternative medicine. So when I started out in 1994 in my formal study of Asian medicine, that's the word that they used back then to describe us, as alternative medicine, as if this medicine didn't work, then you can always try the alternate. So this was considered real medicine. Right? And then there was this other medicine that you can, you can't figure out if you can do that. So nowadays, they call us integrative medicine, right? So we kind of moved up a little bit.
Yep, we're moving up the scale. The scale of consciousness, right?
I love it.
And then so integrative medicine is so, for example, right? So integrative medicine is an example of where somebody comes in and they have severe pain, be it fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis, where there's a flare-up, right? And it is so intense that the patient is now resorting to steroids, having to do that, right? One of the things that's not nice is guilt, any form of it, right? And yes, it has its purpose, right? But I try to do my absolute best, because there's this defeatist mentality sometimes that I've had, I have to do some steroids. I had to, no, it's okay. Like if you needed it, you needed it. Okay. And so this is the power of integrative medicine. Thank God it exists, because if it didn't exist, right? No, let me rephrase it differently. There's a reason why it exists. That's why it exists. Right. And if you need it, then it's wonderful that it's available for you. And then so the fact that you are here post steroids, right? Let's see if we can walk that path. to explore, and to see some underlying pathways or pathomechanisms that might exist that can minimize the likelihood of future flare-ups, right? And there are different systems that exist that we can possibly explore. So this is an example of integrative medicine, where a patient might be on Western pharmaceuticals. And there's some patients, maybe the goal isn't completely getting off of Western pharmaceuticals, right? Like maybe it's enough to just the awareness of self-empowerment, right? Like we're not trying to go to 0 to 60 in 3 seconds right now, right? So it starts with a different awareness that the body can heal. And then we integrate certain ideas. When I was younger, when I started years ago, there was that ambition of, okay, let's go, right? We're going to make this amazing change happen. But I've learned to respect my patients' journeys because I've learned to respect my own, right? If I didn't have the amazing wife that I did, I wouldn't have made as many changes in my life that I did, right? And we made our changes gradually, a little at a time. So we can, allow it to kind of permeate the deeper levels of our consciousness, because a lot of us are in automatic pilot mode. And then so it's more than just changing behavior. We have to change paradigms, and we have to change narratives. And that takes a lot of work. And it's not something that happens overnight. Can we have a healing experience where it happens, a paradigm shifts really quickly? Absolutely, yes.
And Dr. Atil, Donna had a question about can acupuncture help anxiety?
Yeah, so there are, the short answer is yes. Are there acupuncture points that we have that would be good for anxiety? Absolutely. And so at my clinic, the way we kind of approach anxiety, it's a little bit different than like a neck pain, right? So when a patient comes in for neck pain, like you can touch it, right? Like you can point to it. A lot of times it's like right here. And then anxiety is a little bit different, right? We have to explore is, when did your anxiety start, right? What was going on in your life the year prior to that anxiety, right? And then we started opening things up, right? And so that is now a journey. That's a journey of exploration. That's a journey of self-disclosure, right? In medicine, we have this concept called self-disclosure. How much of themselves is a patient willing to share about themselves? Like, hey, we just met. Like, I don't know if I want to go there just right now, you know? And sometimes that's conscious, and a lot of times that's unconscious. I had a patient one time who came in with anxiety and anger and just frustration, and she was stuck. And this may describe a lot of patients, because I kind of do this, but and so this is kind of true for a lot of patients. But so with this particular patient, we kind of explored that, right? And I tried, and it was a cash patient. So it's like she paid out of her pocket to be here to have this conversation, right? And I tried to get there, and no bueno, like we weren't making any progress. Right? Like it didn't seem like it. So to my surprise, next week she showed up again for a second session, right? And again, the anger, there's this wall around her. And I tried, right? I've been doing this for a long time. I got an ability to kind of get in there and explore possibilities. It just wasn't happening. We're having great conversation. It just wasn't happening. It wasn't until the 6th or 7th, and each session, week after week, I was surprised she's still here. Like, wow, because I didn't think she could come back, right? 6th or 7th session, the patient comes in, and she said, I almost didn't come today. And I said, why? And she said, well, I made it to the parking lot. True story. Made it to the parking lot, parked the car, and I just began to weep uncontrollably. Like I just started sobbing, and I was embarrassed. I had no idea where this came from, what's going on. And that's why I almost didn't come. And I was like, well, I'm glad you came. And I can guess what happened. I can offer you some explanations as to what that happened. It could be that there's a part of you, that sacred part of you, that needed to feel safe, that was for a long time wanting to meet you.
Mm.
And week after week, that there was this blockage that was there for one, right? There was a wall that you had built up. And every time we had attempted to go after it and try to kind of dismantle that, it just became that much more solid. But there's a healing that takes place in this place. I am responsible for some of it, but I am by no means responsible for the rest of it. There are mothers and grandmothers that have prayed in these rooms. There are healings that have taken place. This is what I consider a sacred space. And I think that inner side of you felt it and felt safe enough finally to express herself, to come out. And that's not something that you can ask for. That's not something that you can do these techniques and voila, like it's going to happen. That's something that's that transformation, that healing, that we create that space in order for that transformation to be able to take place. Wow. And when that happened, we had one more session. I think she was good after that.
Wow. 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 Well, let me just say this. I mean, listening to just, the resonance I feel from within you as you speak and you share the information that you're so passionate about. There's definitely been deep paradigm shifts that have occurred within you in order to allow yourself to be a vessel to speak on a much higher level to, because outside out of all of these modalities that you're sharing, there's a greater truth, a greater shift that has occurred in you. And I just am like, wow. I mean, I can feel it from you as you're talking and sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I feel that that's true. Healing is a journey. And so there are small milestones we may have, like on my neck or this or that. And this is above and beyond acupuncture and above and beyond, right? This is why people go on pilgrimages. This is why people get together and have feasts and barbecues, right? Like together. And so healing is a journey. And so it is a journey of constantly understanding yourself and seeing yourself not as in just your life, but your life as in a river that's been flowing long before you arrived, and you're part of that flow. And so there's so many different levels to healing. And I think the more healing work that I've done with so many people of different cultures and demographic backgrounds, the more I've learned to understand why one of the four noble truths in Buddhism is that there is suffering. And so what might call us to action might be a physical pain or physical discomfort. But that's just the knock on the door for our deeper soul's longing and yearning for that alleviation of that ultimate suffering, of not knowing and not connecting and feeling alone or isolated. And so when we reconnect, that's when we really, truly experience the wonder, the real wonder of living and of our life. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you want to answer that question?
I think that's so beautiful, because in the work that I do with clients, I often think of it as simply, like the layers of an onion. And you just peel one layer and then you peel that next layer underneath, and you just kind of work your way down. And I love this question. Do you think the trauma could come from past generations even? Because I think it really speaks to that.
Absolutely. And that's a wonderful question. And so absolutely. Yeah. And there are times that the time that we're living in now, there's so much amazing revolutionary ideas that are coming forth, and there's revolutionary evidence to support these ideas that are coming forth. There's a field of epigenetics where they're not just decoding the genome, right? And certain genes that are turned on and off, but there's scientific evidence that if your grandparents were in a famine or your grandparents were in the Great Depression, that there's certain information that's coded in your genetic expression and what gets expressed and what doesn't get expressed. But beyond that, beyond the genes and what gets expressed and what doesn't get expressed, there are ways that we nurture ourselves, that we relate to ourselves, that we protect ourselves. Our fight and flight mechanisms have a lot to do with wounds, as once again, Dr. Gabor Mate would say, our hungry ghosts that have come from long ago. And our ancestors did the best that they could under the resources and the tools that they had to be able to carry us to this point. And our parents did the best that they could. And we're going to do the best that we could. I remember one of the earliest things that I had done, my wife had this brilliant idea of having baby journals that we now refer to as love letters to our babies, the moment they were in their womb. And so I remember one of the earliest things that I had done was ask for forgiveness from them. That I'm going to do the best that I can. And I really am consciously trying to do the best that I can, but I'm not going to get it right. And then so I'm going to try to give you and equip you with the tools and the resources for you to get it right. And so it's a journey, it's a process. So absolutely our past is an expression of today. And I used to think that trauma is a bad thing, right? So here's the bad and here's the good. And so in Man's Search for Meaning, by a wonderful book by Dr. Viktor Frankl, he quotes Dostoevsky that he says, "There is only one thing that I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings." And when I first read that, I used to think like, oh, what's he saying, right? I know exactly where I was, the time of day it was when I read that, and it floored me. And the first thing that I thought about that was like, oh, I wonder if he's saying that, hey, I'm suffering, I shouldn't be suffering. I go, no, this is a deep book. It couldn't be that simple.
Well, we met his grandson, by the way. So I got to ask his grandson a question. And he says, meaning. We should be in search for meaning daily.
Yeah. And that's where I ultimately came up with is no, even in your suffering, there is some meaning. And so it's one thing to be suffering. And yes, you can try to avoid that suffering. But if you can suffer and not find meaning, oh my God, what a waste of suffering. But if you can suffer and find meaning, then now that suffering almost becomes noble. And I don't mean to romanticize or minimize any suffering anybody's going through. Right. But there is an aspect to healing on the other side, where there is that sort of transformation that comes into your being, where you're eternally grateful for everything.
Yeah. And I would say I experienced that in my own journey of the traumas I went through as a kid, realizing a few years ago, wow, if I had not had those experiences, I would never be able to do what I do, and feeling that just that so grateful that, okay, I want to repeat it. I'm so grateful for it. And I think we're at this time where there's just so much opportunity to learn all these different modalities and different mindsets that we weren't really available before. And I think we're just in such an exciting time that we can really uncover so much about ourselves and continue to grow and live our best lives.
Absolutely. Eckhart Tolle in his book, A New Earth, speaks of that right in the beginning, where it used to be that teachers in ancient times were rare, right? They came in once in a generation or once in an era or an epoch. But now there are so many teachers from different wisdom traditions that exist now. You can have a teacher in close proximity that's delivering messages. Sherry and I were having a conversation recently, and she had talked about these sacred contracts. We have these sacred contracts with beings that will appear in our life with these messages for healing. And so we're living in a time when I think those synchronous moments are ever more present.
Well, we want to thank you so much. I mean, my God, the hour just flew by. It was just embedded with such amazing information. And I just am very grateful for you. And so we have your website up on the screen. Can you tell the listeners any other way they can get a hold of you and any information you want to leave them with?
Sure. Yeah, the website is there, and I think that would be the best way. We have a Facebook that sometimes I post stuff, but not nearly enough. And yeah, there's many Instagram, I think, but yeah. You guys, I've been so honored to have this conversation, to be invited. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really, I mean that from my heart.
Yeah, such a joy. And thank you to our guest
Thank you
host
so much
tonight,
for being here.
Christy Jones. Thank you, Christy.
So glad to be here. And when I met Dr. Atil, I knew that you two needed to meet him, and more people, really the world needs to hear what he's saying.
I agree. I want to thank you all for listening in tonight on the High Vibe Nation. Thank you for sharing this out on all of your Facebook pages. We're really grateful for all of you. On Wednesday night, we have our upcoming guest, which will be Alan Dagba. This is a show you do not want to miss. It's going to be very incredible. So until Wednesday night, you can find us on the High Vibe Nation. That is our Facebook page. We'd be grateful if you'd go and have a great evening.
Thank you all again.
From everybody here at the High Vibe Nation, we want to say thank you for choosing to raise your vibration. And of course, please like, share, and subscribe. If you need to find us on the web, check us out at www.thehighvibenation.com. Looking forward to seeing you on the next episode, and keep high vibing.